Thanks for watching this episode of Turning to Him. I invite you to just take a few seconds right now at the beginning and subscribe to this channel so that you can get more videos like this in your feed. Thanks again. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Turning to Him. I am here with Katie Payne, who has taken time out of her day to share some of her experiences with us. I really appreciate that. Katie, how are you doing?
Doing so awesome. Thank you, Zach.
Good, good, good. Real quick, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am from Virginia. I I went to BYU. I lived in New York City, and now I live in Utah. And also, I'm an illustrator, like a fantasy illustrator, first and foremost.
Okay. How did you get into illustration? Is that something that you always wanted to do?
It's just something I always did. It wasn't a question of was I going to do it. I just was born doing it, and that is what I do. That is my thing.
From the very beginning, you knew that was
Yeah.
inside you.
Yeah, my grandpa was a general authority, and he used to say she was born like with it, like she was born to do it, and that's just like how it feels. Like that just it just feels like that's what I am, like or not what I am. Sorry, but yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
my life. Yeah.
I've always envied people like you who just have like a specific talent and passion.
Mm,
That's so great.
uh-huh.
Um, okay, you've had some pretty amazing experiences as you and I have been talking kind of before this.
Mhm.
Um, Give us a quick 30-second summary of what you wanted to share.
Quick 30-second summary is when I was living in New York, I read the quote somewhere that said, you need to, it was a bunch of quotes. You need to experiment. You can like experiment to see, like, they say fast, they say pray, they say read the scriptures, and you can experiment to see if those things really work. And that just kind of, I got really into that. And I did that. And then I had, because I just watched the Spider-Man movie, like a canon event with the spiritual experience, like as a result of that like I haven't been able to let go of. And it's been 7 years. And I just like it just was a really pivotal event for me.
Okay. Um, you mentioned that your grandfather was a general authority. Were you a member of the church before this experience?
I was, yes. I grew up, yes, in Virginia, and yeah. So
Okay. Okay. All right. Well,
yeah.
take us back to the beginning. So you grew up in Virginia. What is life like for you there?
Um, Um, it was one of those things, I was one of two members in my high school kind of thing. Big high school, I was living in Washington, D.C. area. So it was really cool area. But in terms of church things, I definitely felt like an anomaly. And, um, it's a life story that I'm trying to summarize. But basically, when I went to BYU, it was kind of jarring. And anyway, that was a really good experience because my church perspective completely changed. So, all that to say, like, I felt like, oh, I'm a really good member because I'm not drinking, I'm not being, sleeping around, but I wasn't praying. I wasn't like reading scriptures. I wasn't like going to the temple, but I wasn't thinking I should be doing those things. It just didn't, like, because of the world I was in, it just wasn't like a point being brought up that much to me.
Yeah.
And so when I yeah, so then I learned about those things later, and now I'm like hugely passionate about all those things.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
know, That's so refreshing to hear, because I think a lot of times the story that we hear is, oh, I moved to Utah and I was surrounded by all these Utah Mormons and I got this bad taste in my mouth because blah blah blah. And that always kind of irritates me. Like, I understand the culture can be very strong and sometimes the culture can be different than the gospel. But it sounds like you had the opposite experience.
Yeah, and yeah, like yeah, I did. I was amazed by the Utah Mormons. I was like, there's something so special about these people. And it boiled down to, like at BYU, people were like, do you want to go to the temple? And I'd say, well, I don't have a temple to recommend. Like, I just never thought about it because I transferred. At first, I went to school in Washington, D.C. at like an art school.
Okay.
And then after my second year, I transferred to BYU. So it was like very jarring difference. Like, it was like a liberal art school. And then I was boom at BYU. And it was, and like I could explain some of the differences, but it would be like R-rated material. It was like,
Yes.
yeah, like, and so yeah, so like when I remember this girl came out to me, so you want to go to the temple, and then I said, well, I don't have a temple to recommend. Like, I literally never thought about it, and she was like, well, why not? And I was like, oh, anyway, but I was really glad she did that. Anyway, yeah, like people were amazing.
That's fantastic. It's,
Yeah.
okay, so I mean, just to again help draw the picture. So you grew up an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but
Mm-hmm.
and you're not doing any of the don't do's, but
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of it, maybe at a surface level. You go to
Mm-hmm.
college in DC. It's we'll say perhaps a typical college experience,
Mm-hmm.
and then you transfer to BYU and you have a great experience. You love it.
Mm-hmm.
What happens next? You
Well,
graduate BYU?
yes, I graduated. I met my husband there. See, but that's actually because like my life is just littered with spiritual things. Like, part of the reason I transferred is because, like, I'll just tell you all my spiritual things. I
Yeah.
had a dream that I should transfer because my husband was there. And so I did. And then I transferred, and then I met him like day one. And then yeah, it was like it that was true. Like, and anyway, and I love him so much. So
You met him your first day at BYU?
yes.
Did he look like the guy that was in your dream?
No, no, it was the energy was more about the dream was about like an energy,
Okay.
or like just like a person with a certain attitude. And like, yeah, anyway.
When you met him, were you like, that's him? I know that's him.
It's funny because no, I was honestly, he didn't look like my type, but later it's kind of weird to be so vulnerable with like, I'm like, I genuinely think this was a spiritual thing. Like, I couldn't stop thinking about him. And I think it was a spiritual thing. I think it was like that is him. But I was like, no, but that guy's not my type. And why am I thinking about him? Anyway, I ended up marrying him.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
such a good story. Okay. So, I mean, that's pretty difficult to do. You're in college, you have a dream that says, I think I need to go to BYU. For you, were you just like, okay, that's it, the conversation's over, I'm going to BYU? Or did you have to wrestle with that a little bit?
Um, I was so young. I don't know. I was just kind of like, okay, conversation's over. I'm going to BYU. But I was just also young. So I think I was probably blessed with some direction. I was just kind of like floating through life a bit.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
I would also make the argument that I think the scriptures call that having childlike faith. I mean, like, being naive.
Yeah, it was.
That's
It was.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so I keep going back, but there's so much in the
Yeah.
story. This is a great story. So you meet your husband. You are, I mean, are you feeling at BYU? Are you feeling like you are just on a divine mission?
No, so honestly, I mentally, how much do I want to be vulnerable? I started to realize that like I needed like therapy
Okay.
because like I had come from a home with a lot of things that would make someone need therapy, basically.
Okay.
And so that kind of came later. I kind of just was childlike and I was like teenager and I just kind of went through life and then life kind of introduced to me, you know, like walls where I just kind of got what I needed. And then I eventually reached the experience that I'm explaining at the beginning, which was an extremely powerful spiritual experience. And now I'm very like my life mission kind of thing now. So yeah. Does that make sense? I can't believe I'm explaining all this. So.
Sure, you're fine.
Okay.
You're fine. Okay,
Yeah.
so at BYU you start to experience I mean you start thinking, I think I need some counseling. I think I need some help.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is your husband a part of this at all? Is he
Yeah, he's been there the whole. We basically have, at this point have just kind of grown up together. We've been married. How long have we been married? Like 12 years, like
great?
11 years. Yeah, so I met him when I was 20
Mhm.
and I've just spent, we got married like a year later and we've just spent like every day since then together. So he's like been there the whole time, a part of everything. So yeah.
You guys have been a team through this.
Yeah.
It's great. Great.
Yeah.
All right. And again, I don't want to have you talk about anything that you're not comfortable talking about by any
No, it's
means.
okay. It's good
Feel
to
free to-
be open, so
Sure.
yeah.
Um, okay, so you start getting some additional help, you start getting some counseling,
Hmm.
and I mean, at what point do you move to New York?
Right after we graduated.
Okay, so both of you graduate.
Yeah, we lived there for 4 years.
Now, you said in the beginning that he didn't look like your type. I got to ask, what's his major?
So he's an artist too.
Okay,
But
okay.
at the very beginning, he just had this very sporty style because he would play basketball, and I was like in an emo phase. And
Huge,
so I
huge
was
emo
looking,
crowd at BYU.
what?
I said huge emo crowd at BYU.
Oh yeah, there's not. But he's just my type now. Like
Yeah.
anyway, he's obviously my type. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I have to say, I mean, if we're talking stereotypes, I was picturing like an accounting major. But
Oh yeah, no. He's
okay, so
artsy and
so you're
cool.
both artists. You graduate BYU. You've lived in Provo for 4 years. What takes you to New York?
So my husband was going to this ultra skill-based art school. It's called an atelier, and he's a really good painter. Let me
Okay.
show you.
Yeah,
Hold on, I'll
yeah.
be right back. Hold on. He doesn't mess around. I was just looking at this earlier. Look at this master copy he did. Like
Wow.
this is an oil painting.
Oh my gosh. He
So
is
yeah,
talented.
yeah, so he doesn't mess around. Yeah.
Okay, now, well, I'll let you put that back down.
Okay. All right.
You know, you mentioned that your preference is fantasy. What's his preference?
Just hyper realistic,
Okay.
portrait society. He just won an award with the Portrait Society of America, like that kind of thing.
Very neat. Very neat.
Yeah,
Okay.
gallery. Yeah.
So he's going to a very specialized school, and this is, I assume, after you've graduated.
Yes.
Is the school in New York?
Yeah, it's in New York.
Got it. Okay. So
Yeah.
he's accepted this school. You guys move out there.
Hmm.
Okay. For how long were you in New York?
For 4 years.
You're in New York for 4 years. Talk to me about the culture change. I mean, going from BYU to New York.
I mean, for me, it was like going back home. Um, people I grew up with were living in New York and I saw them. It wasn't New York's not that far from like DC. It's like we would go all the time back down to DC to see my family. So it was kind of like going back home. It was just normal for
Okay.
me.
What about your husband? Did he grow up in Utah?
He grew up in Utah. Yeah. For him, I think it was different. For him, I mean, he would have to speak for himself, but I grew up and being a member of the church was extremely unique and interesting to people, and and for him, it wasn't at all growing up. So I think it was good for him because he grew up in the culture and he's frustrated with things, and in New York, he felt that feeling of like, oh, I can see the things that I grew up with that I really cherish. He could just suddenly see the value
Yeah.
of his upbringing and like how that was special from a lot of people. The world is a really hard place and people are really struggling. So, and the gospel is like the pure sense of the gospel, like with Jesus, like can really, you can have a light in yourself that you don't know you have.
Mm.
Like that's what I was always telling my husband, like I'm like always telling him, you're such a good guy, like you're a really good guy, and he just doesn't see it. But I'm like, you're special. Like I'm always telling him. But yeah, but yeah.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like he has a similar experience that you had when you went from Virginia to BYU, except just switched. He goes from BYU
Hmm.
to New York, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but kind of says, "Oh, okay, there is something special to this upbringing and to the
Yeah.
culture."
Hmm.
Okay.
I think you would say so.
All right. Um, Now, get us into the specific experience that you had with you taking this challenge of really planting the seed, testing the seed.
Okay. So I why did I do it? I don't know. Okay, so this is what happened. I'm going to tell the whole story. So I started with, but I'm going to tell it quickly. I had a missionary pamphlet, like one of the missionaries gave me, and I had it, and I, I like prayed or I fasted, like because I read fasting is powerful, and I thought, is it really powerful? Like, is it? I don't know. Yeah, I can't say for myself, so and I read like missionary work is something God really cares about. And I wasn't a missionary. So I just wanted to know. And so I got really serious about it. And I took the missionary pamphlet. The missionary said, give this to somebody. And I'm like, I'm gonna fast to give this to somebody who like wants it. And I did. And then I went to sleep and I woke up and I went on this. I was late for the train, but then I got on the next one and I sat down and I pulled it out. And the woman across from me stood up and came over to me and said, what is that? To my pamphlet. And I was like, it's the missionary pamphlet. And she was, can I have it? And I was like, what? And then she sat down next to me and like thus began like the saga with, I won't say her name, if she does it, but like the saga with her. And that's what brought on the next thing. Because the missionaries were meeting with her and they were like, this is the furthest we've ever gotten with someone and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, well, that really worked. And I'm going to try something else. sure, that worked really well. So I was like, I'm going to do it with the Book of Mormon. And I, so I fasted. I did the book. I was said, like, I just want to help people read this. Like, that was my thing. And then I decided, because I was really into like improv performance work. It's like a New York thing. And so I'm like, I'm going to do like a performance art with this Book of Mormon. And I am not going to put it down. Like, I'm going to read it in public.
Okay.
Like, so, and that was like walking, I'm walking and I'm on the subway and I'm walking and I'm in the park and it was like, I'm just not going to stop reading this book in public. And so I did that, and it was, and then like a curious thing happened, and like it kind of, and well, it can, because like I do all this stuff with Brandon Sanderson now, and it actually connects back to this experience because I had just read his books and I got really sucked into them. So I was kind of like reading them the same way, like I kind of put them down like on the subway. And I got really into the setting and the characters and the drama and the scenes, I'm visualizing them. And I'm wow. And then and then I did the Book of Mormon thing right after. And I was not expecting this at all. No one told me this. No one. People with the Book of Mormon my whole life were just like, oh, here's a verse, like scripture mastery, right?
Yes.
And I was not expecting this to happen. It was shocking because I was just reading it and I remember like it just kind of like something clicked in my mind. And I'm like, holy cow, the Book of Mormon is like, it has an incredible story.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
incredible. And it's like riveting. And the people, and I'm crying over Tiancum, and there's so many little details, like, like anyway, and I was like, this is a really riveting book. And I like and I genuinely like how I couldn't put the Brandon Sanderson books down. I started doing that the Book of Mormon. I'm like, I can't put this down. Like, and it was because I was reading it fully, like from
Yes.
chapter to chapter to chapter. And that was
Yes.
the first time I'd ever done that. Before it was always like bing, 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 And so I was consuming it like a whole sandwich, and I was blown away. And then the spiritual thing happened. So the spiritual thing was I was reading it and I was actually in a dramatic setting. It was Roosevelt Island, which is like an island in the center, of the water, like Manhattan and like Long Island. And I was sitting there like the very tip. It's also where they found part of the Spider-Man movie. But anyway, like the first one.
Okay.
But I was sitting at the very tip, like the island goes so far down it almost just like disappears into the water. It's very dramatic. So I was like sitting there and I was reading it like I was always doing. And I read this verse in Alma that said, behold, you may think this is foolishness in me, but by small and simple things are great things brought to pass. And I felt those words were heavy because I was thinking about all the people who had looked at me like I was stupid.
Yep.
Because this is a public thing I was doing. This is on the subway. I'm looking up and I'm seeing people like, like, what the heck is she reading? This is
Yes.
like New York, there's the Book of Mormon play. Like, I just so many looks. Like, I had people do double takes out of the restaurant. They were like, and they're just like, I've gotten a lot of flicks. So I was thinking, like, I'm doing this thing and I'm being so vulnerable and I'm reading it in public and people are looking at me like I'm stupid. And like the scripture said, behold, you may think this is foolishness in me. So that just really hit me. And I just kind of like had a super vulnerable internal moment where I just prayed internally, like, because it's like life up to that point and all the other things in my life that are also just really hard. And I just was like, here's my husband. Hi, Andrew. Okay. And then I just said, are you there? Like, are you really there? Like, is this stupid? Basically, like, is it stupid? Like, are they right? Are you there? Is like, do you love me? It was like even deeper. It was like, am I even like loved? And it went all the way down. And I was like, so with that super vulnerable feeling, I said, if you are, and then all the vulnerable, if there's, it was like, if this, please, tonight at Ward FHE, because I was going to Ward FHE because of that girl I met on the subway, have the missionaries read this verse. And it was like, and then I ended in my mind with like, and I really don't expect that to happen. You know, I just was shooting, it was a vulnerable internal moment. I never thought I would be explaining to anyone. But then I went, and like the story goes that the missionaries gave a lesson about charity, because it was very basic. It was for investigators. It was charity. We be nice to people. And then they said, I'll never forget. They said, we would like to close with a scripture. And then he said, behold, you may think this is foolishness to me, but by small and simple things are great things brought to pass. And I was that was, I was just like, and I was like, what? Like, that's what happened. And so, and later I was talking to this missionary. So I texted them, just trying to filter out any other reason why this would have happened. And I said, like, why did you read that? And these teenage boys, they were just like, oh yeah, we had another really relevant scripture we were going to read, but the Spirit told us to read that one.
Yeah.
And that was it. Like, that was my canon event. Like, that was all of my vulnerable, like all of my feelings went into that, about everything, about my life and all things. And are you even there? And then I got that. And so I just like, I go back to that moment over and over and over.
That is so great. Do the,
Yeah.
do the missionaries uh, know the role that played in your life? Did you ever explain that to them?
I told them, like, at that time, I was like, you don't understand. But they were just kids. Like, it's funny how it just kind of went over their heads like a little bit. Like, they're just kids. They're like, okay, cool.
Yeah, they're like, thanks. Well, and the missionaries are like, yeah, that happens all the time to us. Like,
Yeah, like that's just what we're supposed.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I love hearing that. I love hearing that because I feel like each one of us, each one of us is a convert to the church. Whether you've been born in the church or
Mhm.
not, each one of us is converted at one point or another. And yes, most of the time it is a slow, gradual process. You know,
Mhm.
the general conference talk about flipping on a light switch versus watching the sunrise. Most of the time,
Mhm.
most of the time for us, it is a sunrise experience, but there are occasional events where the spirit just like grabs you by both ears and is like, this is true.
Mhm.
This is true.
Mhm.
You need to be in with both feet.
Mhm.
I
And
love
I have been true to that moment ever since, because I swore after that moment, I said, I am going to read the Book of Mormon every single day until I die.
yes.
Because why would I stop after that? And it's been like, I just hit my 7-year anniversary,
Okay.
and I've missed like less than 10 days.
That's pretty
But
good.
like, yeah, but I just been like, I was like, I just like, I'm like, if you can get stuff like that to happen because you read your scriptures, like, why wouldn't I be trying to do that every single day? It's like, that was like unbelievable.
That is awesome. That is so
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, how has it changed your life since you've had this experience?
Well, I guess, like, I mean, it's sort of relevant right now. Like, because of that experience, after that, with my art, like I haven't been able to let go of the experience. Like I really haven't. Like I just so after that, I was like, I just want to do Book of Mormon art. That's all I want to do. And I prayed about it, and I did a lot of Book of Mormon art. I did like a Book of Mormon video, like an animated video. I that like people used the screenshots for like Book of Mormon books and things because I did all the art for it. Like that was a huge project I did. I did Book of Mormon children's books. I did I did the cover for the New Era and like a Book of Mormon image, and they've used that image. The church has used that image over and over again. You know, so
Yeah.
like I did all this Book of Mormon stuff. I did, and then like I hit like my 4-year anniversary of the event. Like I remember the day, you know, and I just was like, I'm missing something like that because when I was young, I was just really into fantasy, and I really loved drawing that. And I was like, but I don't want to like stray too far from the Book of Mormon experience, like with my art. And so I just thought back to the Brandon Sanderson books,
Mhm.
how they were pivotal. Because I don't just read the Book of Mormon, like I love it.
Yeah.
And like that love, like his books were pivotal because they opened my mind to the things the Book of Mormon is saying, but it's not blatantly saying, you know. So, you know, with character story, everything, you know, and the stories, it's spiritual. Like the people, like their stories are gospel lessons to me,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know, like, you know, faith. Like I always think about the army of Helaman, and they're just their faith. And but like it's not just the faith, like it's how they barreled into a Lamanite army that was the best Lamanite army. It, you know, there's your children, and like it that said they were fresh and they were like the scariest of all the Lamanites, and then they just barreled in with faith. And then the army of Helaman kids, it said they fought with a ferocity that the Nephites had never seen, and it was so bad that it scared the Lamanites. Like I'm like that, like is my gospel lesson, right? So like that story, you know, not just the quote about like we know our mothers knew it, you know, it's like the story. So so anyway, so I think about the I thought about the Brandon Sanderson book. So I just was like, I'm just going to kind of pivot into Brandon Sanderson so I don't stray too far, but like because I, you know, but I do really, really love his books. And I started doing like fan art for him.
Okay.
And then it just started to grow and grow. Like just yesterday, this fan art I did directly after I decided this is currently like image number 4 if you Google like his top franchise.
Really?
Yes. Like
That's
it's like image number 4. And like I'm like, okay. And like I've done his conventions, like I've done 2021, 2022, like I'm gonna do 2023. And like I'm getting this, like people are starting to like people buy my prints, and anyway it's like growing. And I was just in a YouTube video for him, like YouTube series, and they're releasing the last one today, and like on his channel. And
that is so cool.
yeah, so like that's kind of how it's affected my life, is like I'm getting, I don't know where it's gonna go, maybe nowhere, but like I've met a lot of people and we've cried together, and I've told people I'm really only doing this because of the Book of Mormon. And like the fact that I can even say that, I think is really good. Like the fact that I'm like, all this stuff that you're just into, I can connect it back to the Book of Mormon. You know, I mean, that's really valuable, right?
Yeah.
For gospel perspective, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Hey, before I forget, do you have a website where people can check out your art?
KatiePayne.com.
Paint.com. Okay. Looking
Yeah,
it up.
yeah.
Um, just writing that down.
KatiePayne.com.
Okay. Katie, this has been fantastic. I so
Okay.
appreciate you sharing your experience. Um,
Thanks.
what would you say to a person who is wondering about that stuff. I mean, who hasn't tested the seed? Because one of the things that I heard you say is very generically, you had a question. And so
Mhm,
you asked the question and you sought out an answer. What would you
mhm.
say to somebody who has a question and maybe they're afraid to ask the question like, well, I don't know if I'm does that show a weakness of faith if I ask a question or not? Or what do I do with that?
I would just say life is so hard. Let's just go for the good stuff, And like this to me has been more than a good. Like this has been life-changingly good. Like I said, I've been to so much therapy. Like I get it. Like I had when I was a kid, like terrible self-esteem. Like I get it. Like and like let's just like this has been a good thing. This has been nothing. This has been a great thing. This has been a life-changing thing. This has been a healing thing. This is God. This is Jesus. You know, that's what I would say.
I love it. I love it. That's I think the quote of my month. Life is so hard. Let's just go for the good stuff.
Let's just go for it. Like, let's just go. Let's just grab it with everything.
I love it. Well, thanks again for sharing your experience with us and for being willing to be so vulnerable. I think
Yeah.
this message will touch a lot of people's lives. So thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.